citations.
Like, I would start to end.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
There you are.
Okay. Are you ready for me? Okay, so welcome everybody who is here in person and online to the Constitution Week panel on, I can't remember exactly what the name is, practitioners in politics. A panel which is designed to help talk to students about why participating in politics is important and why politics in general is interesting and worth their time. So we have a great panel, 3 panelists who are here in person, 1 who is online and having some connectivity issues, but hopefully will be joining us shortly, and our wonderful MC. So I will leave it to our MC to introduce the panelists, or have them introduce themselves, and go ahead and take it away.
Hi there. As far as me, my name is Tyler Harris. I'm a political science student here at GSU in my senior year, and I'm president of the debate team, which is a policy debate team here at GSU. So I'm really excited to be moderating this panel today. If we could go around, I'll allow each speaker to, if you can, state your names, your pronouns, your current careers, and how you got into your section of policy starting.
My name is Sarah Beeson. I'm class of Georgia State 2010. I was a BA in journalism with a minor in political science. Since then, I've gotten my Master's of Science in Environmental Management from the University of Maryland, my MBA from the University of Georgia, and I'm getting my doctorate in city planning at the University of Georgia right now, which I got here just in time from Athens. And she, her, hers are my pronouns. I currently work alongside my family running our environmental consulting firm full-time. I'm part-time a doctoral student. I'm a mom of 2 young sons. I'm based in Roswell, Georgia. I am currently running for Roswell City Council, and which is a nonpartisan race, and previous in the past ran for Georgia State Senate for Senate District 56, where I was able to secure nearly 49% of the vote against a 10-year incumbent.
Like I'm still in the process.
I was like an auctioneer, so I'm sorry if that was bad.
So hello everyone. Should I look this? I can look this way. Okay. So my name is Charlene Marsh. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am currently the assistant to the city manager in the city of Norcross, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes northeast of Atlanta. I am a proud double dog. I graduated from the University of Georgia in 2019 with degrees in international affairs and political science. And then I got my master's also from UGA in public administration. To say how I got here, I think in some ways I can say that as an undergrad, I felt like I had some hipster tendencies because all of the kids in my classes, my political science and international affairs classes, wanted to go to the congressional level to work or the state level. And I was like, you know, I feel like the local level might have something going on. So just got really involved in the Athens Clark County community, was really involved with student government at the University of Georgia. I interned with the mayor's office in Athens Clark County, and then went on to intern with the historic preservation organization based in Athens as well. And all of those experiences really led me to working in local government management, specifically where I would feel like I had the opportunity and the ability to really impact change where people, closest to where people are and on a daily basis.
All right. Hey everyone, my name is Terry Fye. I'm the outreach coordinator with Greater Georgia. I'm a class of 2020 graduate from Georgia State University with a BA in history.
And is our
Yes. Taylor. It looks like she's muted. There you go. And there you are. Yay!
Hey.
welcome.
Hello. So sorry for my tardiness, folks.
No, you're perfect.
We were just going through introductions. If you could give us your name, your pronouns, and how you got into your current field of policy.
Absolutely. So my name is Taylor McDowell. I go by she, hers. I just recently wrapped up a stint actually in Senator Warnock's office. And I'm now in law school at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. So that's the short answer, I think, to that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. To kick us off, first we're going to go into basically a little bit about you and how you believe in politics. Then we're going to talk about students shaping their political voice and how we can get involved. And then afterwards, if we have time, we're going to go into the importance of accessibility and shaping new generations within policy. And then we're going to play some fun games and take some Q&A questions. So to kick us off, what's your favorite process about politics, or what did you find to be basically your favorite process within politics? Or your favorite thing that you've done within politics so far?
Do you want to go in a particular order?
No, anyone can answer.
I enjoy the public outreach and public comment process, and I firmly believe in that at not only the federal level with being able to reach out to your congressperson, the state level with, there's lobby days that you can get involved with political organizations, or you can go on your own. It's called going to the ropes. You can call out either your state senator or your state house representative, bring them out, tell them what you feel is important. But I think people really miss out on the local level of going to their city council meetings, because that's really where the sausage is made. And that's when you can make public comments, you can go on the record and make sure that your voice is heard. So making sure to do public comments and public outreach is crucial. Like voting, don't get me wrong, voting is incredibly important, but I think people don't realize how strong their voice can really be when it comes to speaking to your lawmakers directly.
Going into it, I can say that my favorite part about politics in general is just voter contact, voter contact, voter contact. It's something that really gives you the opportunity to talk to people on the ground about what issues really matter to them and what they're looking for in their politicians. So if you're working on a campaign, or ever working for a congress, or working for a public official's office, getting in touch with constituents, like saying, doing door knocking, phone banking, writing letters to local constituents, getting the opportunity to just even table at a local grocery store and talking to people. All super very fun ways. You get to meet all kinds of people and like kind of hear both some things you agree with, some things that you don't agree with. And so it's always good to get like a spectrum and see where people are at in Georgia.
So I feel like I'm with the two of them. Community engagement is my favorite part about working in government. And I think in many ways, it's kind of what led me to work in government in the first place. So just yesterday, I was on my way from Columbus, Ohio for an international annual conference for city and county managers. And I was on the train heading back home. And I got into a conversation with an older woman on the train, and she started to just ask me where I was coming from. She thought I was a student. I told her I graduated years ago. But then she started to ask me what I did for a living. I told her like where I worked and everything. And I learned that she was a former resident of the city that I worked for. And she shared with me some concerns that she had about a housing program that she had participated in. And so I sat and listened to her, and I took notes. And now I'm gonna, when I go back to the office on Monday, have a conversation with my boss about the concerns that she brought up. And that just to me is the power and the value of local government specifically. And again, like with community engagement, just like you said, there's so many different ways to engage people, whether it's tabling or canvassing, and then also with going to public meetings. And I think one thing that a lot of people miss out on is that like we always think that engaging with the community is just listening to people's complaints. But you also find out a lot of people are happy with what the government is doing. A lot of people don't even know there are things that the government is responsible for doing. And so it's also a great way to get information out and to tell them some things that they may not know so they can spread that word throughout their communities.
Sure. And I think what's really cool is hearing this common theme. You know, politics is all about people. And I would say, you know, everybody's exactly right. You know, even at the federal level, it's figuring out those ways to make small and like soft touches with people and to really connect with folks and understand their why behind why they're asking you to support or push for certain policies, and really be able to take that with you when you're having meetings with different legislators and looking at the language of a text, and you have a person in mind a lot of those times. You know, I really relish those times where I'm sitting in a meeting and I can think about, you know, Miss Johnson from Decatur or whoever it would be, and put that into the more formal part of legislating. So, you know, I love the people and connecting with people and figuring out what their story is.
Speaking of the people, one theme also that I've noticed between all of you guys is that you're very involved with talking to people and that hands-on experience, what are some of the challenges that either you or you find that other people that come to you with concerns have, like some of the main challenges, and how do you overcome that?
Does Taylor want to go first? She's always last.
So your question is, what are the challenges that people are coming to us with, or what are our challenges helping them?
Either or.
Both. So a lot of the time, so with people coming to us is access and not really knowing maybe how to tailor their question, and coming to us with a really broad question, and we have to, it's just not talking, government not talking to each other a lot of the times. And so then that goes to the second challenge, which is sometimes you do have to figure out how to, I don't know, like give people something really good, but also you do have to deliver tough news a lot of the time. So that's really challenging. And being within a system and, trying to do as much as you can, but then realizing sometimes that's all that we can do. And it really is up to another part of our government to do that, and trying to make sure that they can continue to follow that path on their own, because sometimes we can't step over there. There are lines that we can't cross over. I can't go, for example, working in a Senate office and go directly to DOJ to make certain inquiries on behalf of a constituent. Like that is something that I can point them to, but they have to do it themselves. But if they don't have access or knowledge about that, then they may be less inclined to do so, or not be able to do that as well.
I think there's systemic issues that are hard to overcome when you have folks who are historically disenfranchised. And so you have the barrier or the obstacle really of people being like, well, I've never been listened to before. Even if I complain, what's the point? So then you lose out on a really wide perspective from people who are probably going to feel the impacts the most. And I mean that with especially Black communities who historically couldn't have access to vote up until, well, I'd say up until about 50 years ago, but we're still overcoming barriers right now. Even immigrant communities. So a personal story of mine, my father is an Iranian immigrant. He came here right before the Iranian Revolution in the 1970s, and comes from during the Shah, and then since then they have an Islamic regime. My dad, the whole entire time I was growing up, actually got into political science because my dad always had the news on. Like we'd have the 5 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, the 7 o'clock. Like your girl knew her current events because my dad had the news on, and he was always commenting on it and encouraging me to have my own opinions. And I started working for the Human Rights Campaign, which is America's largest LGBT advocacy group, in 2014. I worked there for several years. Still based in Atlanta, but I was going up to DC for work, so I was going to early vote. And I was like, Dad, come early vote with me. Like, we're already here. You drove me on the way to the airport. Let's go vote. And he's like, it's okay. I'll just do it later. I'm like, no, come on, let's go. And he goes, I'm not registered to vote. I was like, wait, what? You're not registered? And he goes, oh, yeah, I don't want to get called for jury duty. I'm like, that has to do with your driver's license, and you've been called like 5 times in the last 10 years to go do jury duty. I was like, why aren't you registered to vote? And he's like, well, if you're in the political minority, what's the point? And I was like, if you could think of how many people in the state of Georgia have that same view as you, and if they all went out and voted, how different our lawmaking bodies would look if these folks would be engaged. He's like, yeah, I know, I dropped the ball. And so I went and voted. I went back to work. I flew up to DC. Later that week, 2 weeks later, I get a text message on my phone at my cube at work. And it's a picture of my dad with his first I voted sticker. So he's been in the country at that point for over 40 years and he had an I voted sticker. But that's something that we have a hard time overcoming. I think anyone is trying to make people realize how strong their voice could be if they would just lift it up slightly.
I'm glad that you mentioned challenges when it comes to immigrant population specifically. So my family, I'm first generation American. My family's originally from Liberia, West Africa, and they kind of came in staggers in a way, starting in like the early 80s. And so my family has been here for a long time, but the people in my household, they're not citizens, so they can't vote. And then the city that I work in, Norcross, Georgia, it is about 40% of the population identifies as Hispanic or Latino, and a little over 30, I want to say, percent of our population is foreign born. So of course, there's a sizable chunk of those individuals who may not be citizens, so they can't vote. And then it makes me think of formerly incarcerated individuals and even children, like people who cannot vote for one reason or another. feeling as though voting is the only way that they can engage with government, the only way that they can get their concerns out and have someone actually hear them. And that is something that I really love about local government. Again, I'm trying to spread my local government propaganda everywhere I go. Is that like you don't have to be a citizen to come to a city council meeting to participate in public comment. I mean, there are people who don't even live in our city who come and complain about stuff all the time. And so that's something that I'm kind of new to my role, but that's something that I want to focus on just going forward, is how to get people to come out to just share whatever concerns that they have, knowing that they don't have to vote. I mean, if you are registered to vote or you can vote, you should vote, but there are other ways to engage. And then I would say the second challenge for me, and this is just personally speaking, I'm very sensitive, and I have like a personal connection to the work that I do in public service. And with that comes a very deeply connection, or very deeply personal connection to individual projects that I may start or policies that I might propose, because working with an elected body, things get shot down all the time. And then working for citizens and residents, things are gonna get shot down all the time. They're always gonna find an issue with something. And I'm trying to grow tougher skin, because it hurts your feelings when things that you thought would be a great idea, people think are stupid. So those are really challenges for me with community engagement.
Real quick, so on that, you're talking about citizens and comparing that. I was giving public comments earlier this year at Roswell City Council meeting, and I had a person I'd never met before said they were watching the live stream. They're like, I loved your comments, especially being able to advocate on behalf of those who are politically disenfranchised. One thing you kept saying, citizens. And I was like, the citizens of Roswell this, the citizens of Roswell that. And he's like, my wife is not a citizen, she's a resident. And the language, it's a slight nuance, and I didn't realize how I was being non-inclusive of everyone in my city. And just that one tweak of changing from citizens to residents broadens that scope.
So one of the biggest challenges I've had in my role, like whether it be working on a campaign or working with Greater Georgia, is really just getting people out to vote and really realizing that, again, the worst thing you can do to your vote is to stay home. So TLDR, I think we all saw 2020. I think we all saw that, again, to a complete shift in the January 5th runoff election, with Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff both becoming U.S. senators. But again, what a lot of people don't realize is they won those seats by 98,000 votes when members of the Republican or conservative parties had 380,000 votes and people who stayed home from the election. So again, that entire Senate race was won off the backs of people staying home. And so educating people, and again, talking about your vote matters when you stay home more than it does when you're out. So staying home, really just believing, whether it be legitimate or illegitimate issues with our election system, because there are issues with our election system, and believing that the way to fix that issue is to really stick it to them and stay home. It doesn't do that. The worst thing you can do to your favorite politician is to honestly stay home. The second worst thing is to vote on just only on the day. Vote early, please. So that's really yes. So again, teaching people, and so one of the things that we've really been doing at Greater Georgia is teaching people about SB 202, how it's super integral to the election, how it actually adds safe, secure add-ons to our absentee process, how it actually codifies drop boxes, and how before, what a lot of people don't know is drop boxes weren't even allowed in Georgia law. And so we get this out, and so educating people on that's codified into law. People are able to use them now. And that's actually monitored 24/7 under security cameras, so people feel safe about their vote. And so doing that, a lot of times you run into people who say, well, they're still using X, Y, Z. Well, they're still doing this. Well, I don't think that everything's on the up and up down at the Capitol. It's about telling somebody, look, you can go for a 75% fix, or you can stay home and get a 0% fix. And that's the biggest issue pretty much I've been having, but it's been something I'm seeing less of, and I'm really excited about this year.
And speaking of, thank you again for those personal stories. Speaking of beliefs, has your job or your current position, your current title, has it shaped any of your political beliefs? And if you're comfortable sharing, can you share what one of those beliefs were and what it is now?
Ooh, that's a scary one. I'm the theater student, I'll go first. So going into it, before I go into it, full disclosure, I worked for Senator Kelly Loeffler on her campaign as an intern, as a Democrat. And so doing that, I really wanted to see, because I heard so many things about Senator Loeffler and who she was, really just listening to attack ads on both the Democratic side and also the Republican side against her opponent, Doug Collins at the time, just really trying to figure out, who is this person, really what she stands for, and if there's any muck. I really was intrigued and signed up to intern on her campaign after the George Floyd riots. And so going on to it, I wanted to see basically why were Republicans opposing XYZ reforms federally? Why were we standing against something that in injustice? Why are we voting down these major criminal justice reforms down at the Capitol, down in Washington? So getting onto it and then really working for the campaign, I started seeing, some things not really adding up. A couple of things that I saw that weren't entirely accurate as to who her party was, what kind of values she stood for, things like that. And so really seeing on how a lot of my conservative values, like being pro-gun, I'm very pro-Second Amendment because I believe that as a minority group, we are the first to get our weapons taken away, and the government has no right to take that away from us. And so going like, okay, I can agree with that. Seeing how, being in a pro-business mindset doesn't mean you're necessarily against seeing uplifting communities that historically have been disenfranchised from access to like business loans, things like that. In fact, creating a better business environment helps minority communities. Black unemployment, when it comes to minority unemployment, business development, things like that. Black women being the most educated group, that is helped whenever we create better business environments and pro-business environments under conservative leadership. And so seeing those kind of shifts happening, and then ultimately seeing that, I remember the day I officially changed over was the day John Ossoff said that Kelly campaigned with the Klansmen. So I remember being there on that day, seeing the guy sneaking in, and then seeing that the guy snaps a quick photo with her and then just runs off, which was completely inaccurate. John Ossoff later went on Fox News that day and told that lie, and then they completely just to get some votes in minority communities that he was afraid that turnout was low in. And so seeing that somebody who I really looked up to and thought was a really nice guy tell a lie about somebody I was working for, kind of made it seem like, there are bad politicians on that side, on this side or that side, but I don't think this party really represents my values. And so that really was where that change happened. And so since then, I got my first tax bill, and I got to tell you that I haven't looked back since.
So translating that to students, you'd say researching another party that you may not necessarily agree with, or maybe working a campaign on a party you might not necessarily think you align all the way with, can really broaden your mind and your perspective.
It absolutely does. I can say that a lot of times you start learning about kind of the talking points. Like, for one, we talk a lot about voter access in Georgia and how SB 202 supposedly ruined voter access. When the New York Times, a left-leaning news group and a newspaper that typically isn't the nicest to like Republicans, said that Georgia was in the top 15 states for voter access. That's something that you don't think a Jim Crow 2.0 state does. We beat out Texas in terms of voter access. Alabama, I think Mississippi was somewhere 48, 49, where we have multiple early voting opportunities. Even we spend way too much money on the vote. We spend actually a lot of money on the voter opportunities we provide now, and people don't even use the Sunday.
I just want to make sure I have so many questions.
Sorry.
And you're getting into the juice.
I am so sorry, but like
we're gonna get there. 1 second. Let me just let the other speakers go ahead. And then as we go further on, because you're talking about stuff that I'm going to bring up later on.
I'm sorry.
We'll come back around. No, you're absolutely fine. And thank you. Thank you so much for that vulnerability.
Could I?
Yeah, Ms. Taylor.
Sorry. I wanted to see if I could go next, just because we share some commonalities, actually. I also worked for Senator Loeffler, but on the official side in her Senate office. And I think maybe my experience was a little bit different. And I know the question was maybe about a specific policy, but I think that working in government teaches you a lot about yourself. I think sometimes you know pretty much where you fall on the, hot button issues. You might get a little bit more nuanced. But what I learned about myself is it's okay to go with your gut, and it's okay to like the things that you like and to support the things that you like. And you don't have to be so challenged to everything. And I mean challenged in a way of like really saying that your values and your opinions maybe aren't the way to go. So you're seeking it for the opposite way. Before Senator Loeffler, I also worked for Senator Isaacson, and I think that was a period of curiosity of let me get in here and understand what it is, because coming from Georgia, love my state, love Atlanta, but being a younger Black woman, sometimes I felt restricted. I felt that was a check for Democrats and a check for liberals, and so that was discounted, and so I wanted to be seen. That's what everybody wants to see. But really what I found in my last position with Senator Warnock's office is it wasn't so much about, well, maybe it's the Republican side that I lean with, maybe that's why I'm not being so seen. It was just I needed to be in the right environment. I needed to be, your environment changes everything. So you need to be with people, those groups, whether it's, grassroots organizations or campaigns that you believe in, or, whether it's lobbying and advocacy groups or whatever it is, just really thriving in something that in your core, in your gut, that you believe in and you firmly stand with. That's what I learned is like, that's the most important thing. And that's when you're going to be successful. And I think that's also when you're probably going to be successful for yourself, and then when you're going to be successful on behalf of other people. So I don't know. I feel like, there was a couple, it's really interesting to hear those different sides of two sides of one coin, of one experience of one member, and the slight differences there. And, that's what politics and government's all about.
Working your beliefs and really getting down to the nitty gritty of what you believe. Appreciate that.
My answer is pretty short. I would say that working in local government management hasn't necessarily changed or shifted my beliefs as much as it has shown me how to be more strategic with how I express those beliefs and how I can act on them. And it also has given me a certain level of pragmatism that I don't think I had before. Because when we think of national movements that are advocating for certain types of policies, whether it's economic policy or criminal justice related policies or housing policies, there's not enough discussion about the how. Even when we have policies that are passed on the congressional level, at the end of the day, it's going to trickle down to state and it's going to trickle down to local level to figure out the how. And so that is, I think, something that I think about very, very often is that, like, yeah, I still believe this one thing. Maybe I might believe something about criminal justice reform, or I might believe something about affordable housing, but working daily in like the how has kind of made me a lot more pragmatic than I was before.
I don't know that anything has necessarily shifted ideologically where I stand. I'm one of those types of people who I sit in the middle of a very large Venn diagram, and that I'm not exclusively on the public side or exclusively on the private side. I help my family oversee an environmental consulting firm. We do engineering, geotechnical engineering as well. So there's 50 employees whose livelihoods we have to look out for between me and my family every single day. So it's easy enough to talk about this very lofty policy on the political side, but then on the small business side, see how it's implemented and how our employees, who span the level all the way from a professional engineer down to somebody who is a high school educated technician. So I can see how those policies impact people on the very, very microscopic level. And then it's not a job per se, it's I guess an identifier. Becoming a parent, I think, in many ways helped realign my views, because it's easy enough to look at things from a policy perspective or political perspective of how they impact you. But literally having children and seeing this tiny individual that you're bringing into this world and being like, what have I done? Like, what did I put you in? And feeling responsible for that, I think in other ways has also given me a sense of responsibility in terms of policies of what am I handing down to this tiny person. It takes a perspective out of something that's solely individualistic, and I mean that in terms of, you know, looking out for a business, I'm looking out for employees, I'm looking out for my children, and then trying to take that same perspective and expand it out towards others who I would hopefully be able to represent as well.
Okay, kind of a double-sided question. They fall into the same thing. One thing that I often hear from students, or even something I just said to the journalists in the room, is sometimes I don't feel represented with the politicians. And even as a political science student, I tend to wonder how much power do I really have in just voting, or just as being one unit in this whole political process. Can you speak to why your political voice matters as a student, and what you should do if you do feel underrepresented with the politicians that are being put before you?
The first one hasn't got first. Right.
I have to chew on that.
Oh, you need a minute. Okay, you need a minute to like digest that. Okay.
Can you repeat both?
Yeah, sure. So one side of the question is, why does your political voice, can you speak to why your political voice matters to students, even like in college, or fresh graduates who may feel like their voice doesn't matter because they're a small unit? And also, can you speak to what you believe students should do if they feel underrepresented with the politicians that are being put before them, what they can do in the political process?
Well, actually.
Sure. So in terms of political representation, I say this, I'm old, comparatively speaking. I'm 33. So I guess, while I'm still technically a student, I have a little bit of life experience in the sense of, like, so I've been married for 8 years, right? And I'll put this in the same perspective of being married. There is a litmus test that's very easy to hold people to, and I mean that as the person you're going to vote for and the person you're going to marry. And it's really easy to be like, well, I have to have, you know, you can either say, I want a good spouse who listens to me, supports me in my goals, and ultimately has the same general idea of where we're wanting to go together. Or I need a 6'2" man with brown hair and brown eyes, and he, you know, only on Sundays is he going to watch sports, and he's going to do, you can make it as specific as you want, but I will tell you right now, it's going to be really, really hard to find that specificity in a potential partner and a political candidate. And so when you're looking at people that you're wanting to vote for, look at who's in front of you. It's not who's my ideal candidate. This is the person who's going to be, you know, the kingdom of all of the United States, and this is, I put all of my eggs in this basket. No, it's in this election, does candidate A have the same ultimate goals that I'm trying to get to? Are they going to support me and my goals? And do I feel like we're going to be on that journey together? Or is it candidate B? I think a lot of times we have a tendency of getting in the weeds, of having these really high expectations out of our candidates and overlooking the fact that they're human, and trying to see more so what the big picture is that they're trying to represent, instead of getting into the minutia of every single policy that they put forth. If there's a policy that you're really into, by all means, double down on that. But if there's, I was a poli-sci student too. I think poli-sci students in particular, like, well, I have a policy for each and everything, and if I can't check that box, then they're out of there. You're not going to vote at all. So try to get an idea of the big picture view of what they're trying to convey.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Sure. Well, number one, it was the highlight of my job whenever I had a student group come in, whether that was with myself with the senator or just by myself with another staff member. I think that kind of engagement just exposes people to more. You know, number one, that's just showing people what's out there and what's a possibility for you as a career, as well as just knowing what's happening in your government with the people that you elected. But number two, a lot of my experience with some elected officials is there's ignorance in the sense of just not knowing how policies affect people on the day-to-day process. And that's for a myriad of amount of reasons, right? Like that can just be just not having that lived experience, literally never having someone tell them that, or, then there's the one that you hopefully don't want to have, which is, willful ignorance and really just pushing it to the side. But I have seen it over and over and over again happen in all 3 of the Senate offices that I was in, where a student group has come forward and I've used them as an argument for signing my boss onto a bill or having them vote in favor of something when they were possibly like not really sure where they were going, or pushing them to take that information into a conversation with another colleague and say, well, this is what I'm hearing back in Georgia. Every single memo, every email, had some line about what the constituents were saying. And so, at least in our offices, and I think Georgia's a really good template for that, at the federal level, like we really mean it when we say we take this to the members. So, it does push policies and it can change people's minds. So that's why to be so involved.
Thank you.
I actually have a story. So I was in student government for way too long, and I remember I was in student government for way too long. And I remember during my last year, there were 2 students, the executive vice president of Atlanta and the president of the entire university, Hansa Rahman and Jasmine Mejia. So I remember particularly the 2 of them had a very big issue with the Grady statue in Atlanta. So for those who don't know, Henry Grady was reportedly I don't think reportedly, I should know that as a history major, but I'm just gonna stick to my guns and say reportedly, was a big member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so we all know that Atlanta is one of the most diverse, multicultural cities in the state and the Southeast, yet we still have this person here who doesn't necessarily represent the values of the students who are walking by him every day. And so knowing that they didn't have the ability to change a law, knowing they didn't have the ability to vote on the city council, and tear down the statue, know that they couldn't go to the legislature and tell Governor XYZ to do that, they decided to get together, got with their student newspaper, which they had people who were willing to write an article about it, and actually signed with several student groups, implementing and blowing up the issue when nobody knew about it before. And so I was educated on it, the student body was educated on it, but most importantly, the university and the Atlanta City Council was educated on that. It was so big it got into the New York Times. And so again, never underestimate what you can do as a student, even something as simple as being a part of a sit-in, going to a protest, talking to your local city council. Helping you guys on that local side. Doing that can make such a difference to where you might not get in the New York Times, but you'll sure as heck move some people, put some fire under some tails.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that, because I think the idea that college students don't have power couldn't be further from the truth. I think a lot of people think that because college students are in such a transient phase, and a lot of you may stay in a certain college town or in a certain space for maybe 4, 5, 6 years and then go. But I think that there is a lot that students can do, because at the end of the day, even if administrators don't want to listen to your voices, they have to, because if you get upset enough, if you have enough of an impact on how universities are operating, I'm not going to say too much, they have to respond to those students' needs and to those students' demands. But I think in a larger sense, kind of stepping away from university specifically, I would remind people that today's world is a product of other people's political action. So like you said, people decided to stay home or people decided to get out. Like the leaders that we have today, the leaders that have been in Congress for decades, they're there because someone decided to vote them in and someone else decided not to vote at all. And so when you don't feel represented in those bodies, I think you have to ask yourself why you don't feel represented. I think you have to ask yourself, what you stand to gain by deciding not to participate because you don't feel represented, and what you stand to lose. And I also think, take a step even more outside of that, if you decide not to participate at the ballot box because you don't feel represented, I can't compel anyone to vote, but I do always want to make sure that if someone is not voting, they're doing something else to positively impact their community. Like, what are you going to do in the absence of that adequate representation that you feel like you deserve and that you need?
Speaking of that impact and my generation, Gen Z is all about the internet and social networking.
Hey, I'm not that old, y'all.
I'm
I'm 25, I'm Gen Z. Like I got some mold on me, but I'm still there.
So with my generation, especially since we are graduating and coming through college in these years, what can you speak to as far as using social media and social networking applications to get involved in politics? Or can you speak to any of the current outreach programs you may do on social media?
So I got involved in politics because of social media in many ways. So I'm a millennial. But there were Facebook groups for political organizations here in Atlanta that I would see their meetings were coming up. And so it's easy enough to just see it and be like, oh, whatever. I started going to the meetings. So that's how I knew about it. That's how we organized, was through social media. But from there, that's also, we use not only social media, but I think texting became really big back in my day. People started doing the text to get voters, GOTV. So you start texting voters to try to get them out. I think the challenge is to, I would say, Gen Z as a whole, is how are you going to build upon that to continue to engage folks about voting? Because attention spans with things like TikTok are shorter. Like, it's not, we don't have 2 minutes. Like, this is a 30 seconds before I swipe situation, and that's assuming it's already visually engaging. So how are you using that to educate and inform and do it in a way that's rooted in fact and not just what's sexy and cool to watch on TikTok? And I think the sky's the limit in terms of creativity for Gen Z. How do you make it interesting for Gen Z to vote? And how do you translate kind of what we've been saying of like, inaction is still an action, and letting folks know that. So I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward, but I like Twitter. I like Facebook. I know that's maybe not the cool place to be anymore. I kept in touch with my political science professor in social media. And now I get going over this feed when I get to look at like pictures of his dog and he gets to see pictures of my kids. But I also get to engage with folks, right? And continue to build those connections. And I get to talk to folks in a broader way that I might not have engaged with in kind of a day-to-day life. But how do we build on that?
I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
I think everyone does.
Particularly the kind of, and I don't want to say this, and I don't want to be rude when I say this, but the the serialized, the like glamorization of like political trends.
I agree.
I feel like a lot of people go to these. I feel like a lot of people end up going to, say, a protest, or end up going to like, say, a rally to get the selfie with the candidate and then bounce. Y'all, I can tell you this: you are going to get 3 likes on that post, and then 3 likes on that post, and you're going to expand that candidate to like maybe a couple of people in your circles. So when I say that, like, how to use social media in terms of like your politics and expanding your brand, make sure it's of you doing something, engaging. Taking a photo after voting, that's great. Take a photo of you door knocking. Get the action of you working with a candidate to help them call and phone and do the boring stuff behind the scenes, but blow it up everywhere. Take photos, do this, do that. And that's the best way you can use your social media, mobilize it, and basically be able to help out to get either your candidate, your movement, your idea, mobilizing it and getting it out.
I would agree with that. I think if you're going to use social media as a tool for political engagement, make sure that you follow things up with a call to action of some sort. And then I'd also say to be wary of misinformation. I am part of Gen Z. I'm 24 years old. And I feel like a lot of us, we just think that it's only boomers and everyone else who can fall victim to misinformation. But I think it's so much easier for us to find ourselves in echo chambers when we're on social media because of algorithms, because of how we're choosing who we're following, that misinformation can just like slip in, and it can have real impacts on people's lives, real impacts on policies. So yeah, I think definitely follow up the calls to action and also be wary of misinformation.
I don't know if I have that much more to add. I feel like you guys have covered it. And I will admit, I am not the most like social media savvy or tech savvy at all, even though I am a millennial, as they tell me. But I think like just show up as yourself, to Gen Z, be creative. I think that in every area of politics, you're part of the process already. So continue to show up as yourself and push us forward. But be careful, be cautious with social media, stuff, it lasts forever. Even if you delete it, someone's got a screenshot. There are literal bots that are taking screenshots of that stuff. There's different privacy, concerns we can get into later there. But yeah, just be creative with it, I think is the best way. And I love the following up with action and being open to people asking questions that you may be posting thinking that everybody likes it and you're just kind of posting to go along with everybody. But I guarantee you someone's going to have something jump in your DMs and be like, what is this? I didn't know about this. Can I do that? So make sure you have those steps for them to be able to follow through if you're going to put that information out there.
Thank you. Speaking of, I love that word echo chamber because it really does. You can go down a pipeline on TikTok, right? With this being in the midst of election season and we're seeing all these different campaigns on YouTube of people doing different things and having different perspectives, how do you recommend students view political campaigns or how do you personally fact check political campaigns? Because we always hear as students, do your research, but you go here, they're leaning this way, you go here, they're leaning this way. What's your favorite way to do your research?
Check their voting record. And what I mean by that is if they are an incumbent, there is a very quick and easy way to see on each and every policy how they voted on it. We'll take the Georgia General Assembly as an example. If education is something that's important to you, K through 12 public education, go through, find your state senator, find your state house rep, and look at their voting record on all things related to education and check how they voted. If they have nay votes, look to see what other people did nay votes and see if you can figure out why. A lot of times there'll be news articles on it, and it's not always apparent from the voting record why they did it that way. It could be because they decided that there was already a law in the books for that, and it was redundant. It could be because it was going to override budget in another area. But the easiest way to know someone's record is to look at it.
Unfortunately, it takes time. I think of course, you can find organizations that might post like voting kind of like cheat sheets on social media and such, but something that I do, I just go on like the Secretary of State's office's website, look at who's like what district I'm in, who's running that year or running that cycle, and then I just have to go and search those people's names and find out what's out there about them. Of course, it's easier to find information on incumbents, but a lot more people are getting politically engaged in ways that also include running for office now, and so it's going to be a little harder to find information on those people. But any modern campaign is going to have a website of some sort, and I think that's a great way to find out what those candidates' values are, what their past is, what their vision for their district is. So definitely use the resources that are out there that are objective, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I like all of those, and I think as you're going through those steps, maybe the more nerdy answer is go to C-SPAN. If they're an incumbent, go to C-SPAN, type their name in, and it already clips like what committee hearings they participate in. You can hear the questions that they're asking. You can hear the responses. You can hear the statements. You can see them speaking on the floor. You can see them out in different forums. And so then you're hearing maybe in a less polished way and rehearsed way, really speak about the things that they are working on. while you're looking at their voting record, you know, have it next to you as well and be like, okay, well, they voted on this and they said this, okay, that matches up. Or they did this action, they co-sponsored this bill, they introduced this bill. And then if you can get out there and go to not only just a campaign rally, but see if there are other, maybe like on the official side of events, and see if there are other events that you can go to, a town hall, if they're visiting a historic spot in your town or in a community close to you, try and go there so you can, you know, see them in real life as well.
The best way to catch somebody and to figure and how to fact check somebody is to look at what they said 5 years ago and see if that tracks with what they're saying today. See if if they are the same person about this issue. Because again, you might see on campaign ads, political talking points, XYZ person said they're going to do this, and now they're saying this. What's the real campaign slogan? And a lot of times that's usually what's happening. So a person will change or moderate or kind of figure or go more for one issue based on what the trend lines and what the polls are saying. But honestly, if you want to figure out what a person said, what a person's about to do, or what a campaign's thinking about, go 5 years ago, see what the environment was then, go 5 years forwards. Go to now, see what the trend lines are now.
The only thing I'll say is I'll push back on that a little bit because people change, people evolve. I think about where we were 5 years ago. I think 2020 for a lot of people kind of made a lot of people more politically aware and politically engaged in ways that I personally hadn't seen in my lifetime. And I'm sure they said some stuff 5 years ago that they wouldn't agree with today. So I think, with that, it comes with is this person acknowledging that transition or that evolution, or are they just going to act like that didn't happen?
That's a fair point.
So I just want to jump in. One tool that I used in my own personal life to combat misinformation is an online tool called Bot Sentinel, which will identify Twitter and Instagram accounts that are likely bots. And you can search there's actually a Chrome plugin where it will automatically search everything every account that comes down your Twitter feed. And I have that. But you can also search one by one. And it will rate each account and based on how likely it is to be a bot based on their posting behavior. And that's a great way to identify problematic accounts that you run across on social media. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that one in.
I'm adding that to my notes.
Bot Sentinel.
Sentinel.
One word, Bot Sentinel.
That's
Bot Sentinel, C-SPAN, said the General Assembly, and the Secretary of State's website. Those were all mentioned.
Yes, Legiscan is the one that they use for the Georgia General Assembly.
So we've been talking about politics. It's been fun. It's been nice. But usually politics is more so the conversation that's the elephant in the room, that scary conversation that we kind of want to have with people, but we're scared of what they might say. For you personally, how do you recommend that we make politics a more accessible conversation or a more fun conversation? Or do you think that the weight surrounding even just the word politics or the conversation surrounding it are necessary? Ms. Taylor?
Oh yeah, because I'm really trying to think about that one. Yeah, politics, I'll admit this even, for me sometimes it's a scary word. I like the word governing a lot more for me and what I was doing, because that is supposed to be a way more balanced relationship of how we're interacting with our constituency and with our legislators. And so, I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of your question, if you don't mind?
Yeah. How do we lighten the conversation to make it more accessible, to make it more fun? Or do you think that the weight surrounding the conversation is necessary?
Okay, right. So in certain areas, it's absolutely necessary. I think everything is serious, but it doesn't have to be depressing. I think asking the questions and being honest about why you're asking or what you're asking is entirely appropriate to every interaction with a politician or with a legislator or with some governing figure authority. So I don't know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is just continue to show up as yourself. And if you have a question, I guarantee you somebody else has a question or has that problem. Find a maybe coalition, find a group of your friends. That's what I was saying earlier is I loved when groups of students came together. That makes it a little bit less scary to ask those questions to these authority figures, right? Because um, ultimately, we're electing them to kind of find out those answers sometimes or help us figure out how to find those answers as well. So, maybe doing it in a group, going to an advocacy group or something like that makes that a little bit less scary.
And maybe I should change the language around it. Are there forms of political self-care that you do? Fun things. So you mentioned finding groups of friends that have the same beliefs as you so that you guys can do community service things together.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't know if this is controversial, but sometimes I do have to turn off the news. I had to just focus on what the task at hand was. Um, we are fighting voting rights and making sure that folks have their protections and have their rights restored and know how to exercise those rights, And sometimes that didn't mean that I needed to be listening to what MSNBC or Fox or whoever, CNN or whoever, whatever, print, television, all that stuff. I just need to focus on what constituents were saying and how we need to get those results and what was happening. So maybe that's a form of self-care. Is maybe controversial, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend the media. I love the media.
So I'm gonna respond to the initial question that you asked, if that's okay. So I've been beating this drum for years now, and I'm gonna say it here as well. I don't think that politics is the issue. I think partisanship is the issue. And I am willing to bet that people talk about politics way more than they even think they do. Because I personally believe that everything is political. From your roads to your food to the air that you're breathing to the schools that you attend, like literally everything is a product of a political decision at some point. And so this is something that I've been constantly, struggling with in my profession because I don't know if Woodrow Wilson rings a bell, but he's considered the father of he's considered the father of public administration, like as a discipline. And one of my first classes in grad school, it's like you have all these discussions about this idea that he coined, or this term that he coined, which is the politics administration dichotomy. And that is kind of like what my profession was kind of based on. It was like administrators are completely separate from the process of politics. It's going to help us avoid corruption, all of that stuff. And as time has progressed, more and more public managers and people in the profession have been like, we can be nonpartisan actors, but we are still political actors in a way, because we are still navigating this system of politics. We are still working with and working for political actors who were elected. And I mean, to the second, I guess, reworked question, definitely agree with turning off the news. But I don't know. I think that's also still something that I'm still struggling with myself. Is like, how does talking about politics have to be depressing? For me, it kind of is. And that is why I'm in the field that I'm in, because I don't want it to have to be depressing for people to talk about their quality of life or like the state of affairs surrounding them.
One thing I don't know if I can make politics fun, but I think the one thing that you want to do before you have any conversation is talk about the R word, and that's respect. You always want to go into a conversation, whether you're talking about even the big topic that I'm sure a lot of people on college campus are concerned about, the A word. When we're talking about that, whether you're PC or PL, you want to make sure that you're always starting the conversation up. Before we get started, I love you. You're my bestie. Ain't nothing ever gonna separate us. But this is why I feel X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. You always want to have that whenever you're talking to your friends or your family members or anybody else. As long as you are not in that barbershop, you should always start the conversation off and say, we're gonna talk rationally. We're gonna be respectful.
What's the A one?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to? We're adults. We're all adults, or half adults, knocking on adult shit. I believe you're talking about abortion
Yes.
and the laws that were passed.
Sorry.
I didn't know what you were talking about.
I
Yeah,
just say, I just say abortion.
I understand when you said PL and PC, but the A was like, okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
Wait, what's PL?
Politically
Pro-life,
Oh,
pro-choice.
I was making up our own acronym.
I'm old. PC means politically correct.
Same, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
And then when you said PL, I was like, okay, maybe he meant politically
I was
liberal,
trying-
politically conservative.
Oh.
Okay.
We use, I know there's a few social media networking sites where you use like, kind of like trigger.
Trigger warning,
word-
TW.
Yeah, like trigger
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
just to make sure no one's
No, absolutely.
triggered on the site.
No,
Thank you for that.
I think I agree with all the speakers so far. I think you really hit the nail on the head, which is, it goes back again to that common theme of inaction is still inaction. I guess because I grew up in, I'm just real outgoing and extroverted. There's never been a point in time where I'm like, this is a weird topic for me to discuss. No, I'm the person who like, we're at a happy hour brunch and I'm like, so let's talk affordable housing. And like, long ago, under the FDR administration, a New Deal. So that's just intrinsically who I am. But kind of what you're talking about, there's things to me that like the word abortion to me doesn't make me feel weird, or in certain situations, there's things to me that are inherently political, but they're also inherently a part of your daily life. And I think in the same way that I think the old school way, like we don't talk about salary, I'm like, why? This is weird to me. Yeah, I think normalizing it and making it in a way to what your point is, it doesn't have to be at odds with each other or overly partisan. It can be a respectful conversation, but recognizing the fact that everything is inherently political. And I think when we don't have these discussions openly, or we only do it behind a keyboard and a screen where you can like just scream at someone, and then in person you're like, I don't talk about politics, but meanwhile you're like, politiboard.com being like, I hate all of the whatever. Yeah, exactly. I'd rather just address the issues and where you stand on things. And I think more likely than not, regardless of how you identify or align with, you probably have a lot of overlapping similarities. And I think because we don't have these conversations, it's really easy to be even more polarized because we don't have open conversations to understand the similarities and the overlaps.
Can I add one more thing to that? Because I think you brought up a really good point about like the overlap and how you don't know unless you have those conversations. I think this, for specifically college students, I would say take as much advantage of the space that you're in right now to be surrounded by people who have different political beliefs and political leanings than you. Because, I mean, when you get into the real world, like, yeah, you can still interact with people who don't think the way that you do, but you're doing a lot more self-selection. And I mean, part of the reason why I even majored in political science was because, I'm gonna say the echo chamber word again. I studied sociology initially, but I just felt like everyone in the classroom agreed with me. And I was like, if I know I want to work in government one day, I know I'm going to have to work with people who think differently than me. So that's when I like switched my major to political science. And I think even today, I still have to kind of like go the extra mile to build relationships with people who don't necessarily agree with me, because it's so much easier to just not do that.
I'm the same way. We're gonna be friends.
So since we're talking about politics and outreach, for example, I think accessibility is becoming a very, very big thing within my generation, and pushing forward, making sure that all things are accessible to all people, whether you have a neurodivergent background or maybe you're deaf or hard of hearing, whatever it may be. What are ways that you make political processes or policy in general more accessible to people? Or what are ways that you recommend we make politics more accessible to other people?
Politics specifically or policy?
So either or, however you want to answer.
So from the city planning side, city planning historically has been overly male represented, which means city planning is not just, what road's going to go where. It's also how the land is going to be used, which buildings can go where, how is this zoned, does the interstate go here or there? And I think accessibility is something that comes up often, but not enough, especially in terms of design. And I would say becoming a mother has had more of an appreciation for accessibility as a whole. And I mean that by, I'll use, my husband and I went on a trip to New York City, for example. We have like the stroller. Strollers go places that wheelchairs go. And you realize how few places you can go. And if I was a parent by myself, like I have my husband carrying the back of the stroller and I've got the front of the stroller, we're like, run down the stairs, but don't eat it. So it makes you look at the city from a different perspective and how you interact with areas in a different way, and makes you recognize how that might be somebody's every single day life. Like, sure, I can tell my 2-year-old, like, get up, we're walking, and I can just collapse the stroller, but there's people who don't have that option. I think policies, and in some ways politics, should be looked at a very similar way, and that you should find ways to get out of your comfort zone and see how policies that might not impact you on a daily basis can impact others, and how that can possibly shape your perspective in some ways.
Christine?
I'll jump. Yeah, sure. I think just, yeah, continuing to normalize it, and to speak up and say that it is a big deal when folks may not explicitly say that it's not, but by their actions may say so. So, you know, I think about earlier this year, I think the White House had some sort of tele-event, and they put up subtitles and they had an interpreter there, and people were asking, I kept saying, you know, why is this happening all of a sudden? Why is this happening now? And I'm like, that's the wrong question. Why wasn't it happening for a long time? And sure, I know I wasn't one of the voices asking for it even, you know, but it dawned on me like that should have been something that was normal, and it's not a big deal to go that way. It is not extra. It is not being too much to ask for it. I think just continuing to say, you know, there are a group of people, even if it's 2 people, even if it's 1 that needs this, and we have to open up and accept that. That's, you know, that's not only what inclusion is, that's what belonging is. That tells you that you belong to receive this and be part of this process. So I think that just, once again, it goes to coalition building, is find your people and tell whoever it is at whatever level how much is needed, how much is necessary, and don't let up until it's done.
So as an outreach coordinator, this is kind of my gist. So one of the ways that we always try to get people involved in terms of, like, whether it be helping to register, helping to get out and get out the vote, or register people, or help us register more people and get them involved in the conservative movement, is basically we try everything. So when it comes down to talking to people through text, calls, phone banking, text and calls. Wow, I mean phone banking and calls. Through door knocking, or just getting people involved and telling them, get your neighbor to come with you. Bring a friend, make the experience a little bit better. Bring your spouse or partner or whoever you're with, a friend, somebody, and make the experience a little bit better, and that will help. In terms of like college students and getting in accessibility, that's where I'm like, I'm going to actually ask everybody who is a college student to do a little homework. A lot of times, our generation is getting to a point where we have a lot of things handed to us, but that little bit where we have to go forward, we might not be willing to do, because we're so used to that everything being so accessible. But a lot of times you got to do a little bit more homework. Sometimes you got to look under your representative or their campaign website and see, where can you go door knock? Where can you go get involved? What events are they happening? Sometimes you got to look through a million pages just to see where the opportunity is for you to fit into that puzzle and get your first start. Because a lot of times, again, I think I can speak for everybody in here right now, is we had to first put in an application to get where we are now. And that's some things that you guys have to do as college students, as young people, into getting into these careers and these career paths that you want to go into.
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. Did you ask how we are making politics/policy more accessible, or are you asking what college students, well, actually it's 3 questions, or are you asking what college students can do to make politics and policy more accessible to others, or
It was both of those questions, however you wanted to answer it. Because I know some of you may not want to talk about like certain things that you're doing.
Yeah.
But if you want to.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I live by the words lifting as we climb, and I think that's just something that I carry with me everywhere I go. And my face. I truly do believe that college students have a lot of power and a lot more than they think they do. And so just in terms of making politics and policy more accessible, especially for those who are already politically engaged, I'd say to like go and find people. Like if you want to know what is and is not accessible to disabled folks, if you want to know what is and is not accessible to trans folks or people whose first language is not English, you have to go find them. And I don't think it's our responsibility to say what is and is not accessible if we are not members of those groups. But the only ways we're going to figure out what is and is not and like change that is by going to those individuals themselves and asking them, what is it that you need? And that's kind of how I guess like I approach my work in government. Like every proposal that I make, every project that I work on, like it's never an original idea. It's always based on a need that someone else has expressed and they have asked or requested that something be done about it.
Okay, this is a fun question.
These have all been fun questions. Don't sell yourself
It's a
short.
real fun question. So can you remember your first political event, like your first major political event you saw on TV? So for example, for me, I am currently 21 in 2022, if you're watching this later on. And my first event, I believe, was the recession. Like I specifically remember being like 7, 8, 9 years old, and being like, what is going on? And seeing that on TV. Just wondering, what's your first political event you very specifically remember, just seeing the news or seeing something about it, and that was your first imprint?
I got one. My first, actually, I don't know if it's political, but I'd like to say historic event. Watching the inauguration of Barack Obama. That for me, and I feel like that speaks to so many young people as Obama being one of the first figures to make politics and to inspire so many young people today. I don't like saying it's political, but again, it is that big moment where you see somebody who looks like you being in a role and showing you that you can aspire to that. And I think that's really was a big moment for me.
Still chewing, Ms. Taylor?
Mine's embarrassing.
Ms. Taylor?
Gosh, I'm still thinking. The first that I don't remember seeing it on TV, but I guess historical, and I don't know if I can really pinpoint one thing, but an early memory, I grew up going to Ebenezer Baptist Church, so historical church, we had a lot of really important folks being there. So I remember the first time meeting Reverend Jesse Jackson and meeting Al Sharpton and meeting members of the King family. And what sticks out to me as a little, maybe like 4 or 5-year-old Taylor, was just like how intense they were in having a conversation in that relationship. And I think that was what that church was always about. It was just direct relationships with folks as well, and still is. And I think that's just something, it doesn't really speak specifically to politics or to government, but it just is, how you interact with the world. And I don't know, it is the way that you do get things done by connecting with people on that one-on-one basis. But also to echo, I think one thing I do remember is obviously the 2008 election and being at a predominantly white high school, and that being on our newspaper felt huge and felt really important, and it felt amazing. I'll never forget that day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with those as well. I feel like when I was in the 6th grade when Obama was inaugurated,
We Megan.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was kind of mean, not gonna lie. Like, I just was not like a very kind person. I'm a youngest child, only girl, so like, if that gives you an idea. And well, actually, I guess I'll reverse. Thinking of like election night specifically. And I remember telling myself, I was like, God, like if you let him win, I promise I'll be a better person. And like low-key, Obama's the reason why I think I'm a better person. Like I was just like, I don't know. But like seriously, I think a separate, I guess, memory for me, which I can't even pinpoint like the exact day or whatever, As I mentioned, my family is from Liberia, West Africa, and part of the reason why, or one of the reasons why my family came over to the U.S. is because there was a civil war. We have undergone 2 civil wars. And so just like in my household, I always was hearing stories about what Liberia was before the wars, what it's like after, having family members who were jailed because they worked in the government that was being overthrown at the time. It really put a lot of things in perspective for me, just like the idea of freedom, but also the idea of understanding like the impact that that representatives of the government could have on people's lives, not only there, but also, I mean, the U.S. government, for example, like the impact that it has had on the Liberian government and the entire nation. And that really kind of got me interested in international affairs and government in general. And I used to tell people like I wanted to be the president of Liberia, and they never let go of that. And I don't want to be the president of Liberia anymore, but it did kind of like get me on this track to being in public service.
Cool. I'm just going to take the wind out of all of your inspiring stories and note that I am, again, 33 years old and grew up in a household that was very politically engaged. Like CNN was a thing starting in the late 80s. My dad really bought into that. So we had the news on a lot. So the Monica Lewinsky situation was the most notable event of my youth. I knew fragments of things. So like the Gulf War, the situation in Bosnia. I didn't necessarily understand what was happening. I just kind of got sound bites like this, something's happening. This is bad. I followed, like the 1996 election. I used to do an impression of Bob Dole when I was 7 years old, to give you an idea of who I am as a person. But yeah, I think that was the first time. It probably didn't help either that I also watched Saturday Night Live as a child. So I also could do like impressions of the people in the Lewinsky situation. But to be more inspiring, the first time I ever cast a vote in a political election was for Barack Obama when I was 19 years old. So I came around full circle.
So this will be our last official question, and then we're gonna go into a short little fun game. If anyone in the chat happens to have any questions, you can drop them now, and we will address them before we close. So for our last question, is there anything that you want to leave students with, students who may be watching or future students? Is there any end all be all that you stick by or something that you think can really help them as they shape their political processes going forward?
I'll go real quick. Like I said, inaction is an action. So saying, I'm not going to vote because I don't see a reason why you're voting by proxy, in the sense that you're not lifting your own voice or deciding which of the candidates you think is best representative of you. And politics is as accessible as you want it to be. Whether you want to go to a city council meeting or you want to go meet with your own mayor or you want to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with your senator, it is as hands-on or hands-off as you make it.
I would say that voting is extremely important, but also voting is only one tool at your disposal. So do whatever you can to bring power into your community, and also pay attention to what's happening on the local level, whether it's school boards or your planning board or the city council. A lot of policy decisions are being made on a daily basis that impact you.
Sure. I'll just say it's just remember that it's about engaging and connecting with people, and that everybody has a story and a reason behind something. So, don't be so quick to judge everybody, I think, at first glance, and really get to know them in the way that you have availability to do so. But then also I would just want to leave with everybody that there is space for you. There's space for everybody in all areas of politics and government and in life, period. Continue to show up as yourself, continue to be proud and curious and humble, and that's how you're going to make the most effective change.
And I would like to say, this is America, land of the free, home of the brave, but most of all, there's an opportunity at every single corner. If you want to get involved, if you want to do something, you want to see or make a change, and you don't know where to start, I'm telling you this right now, no, I bragged on them earlier, start with student government. See how it is, see if you want to try it, see if it's for you. Find out, talk to people who might be a little more experienced, get involved. Then try volunteering. Get involved in your local city council, get involved in a race, or knock for a candidate, do something. But don't be afraid to take that first step. If you don't, you never know what opportunity you're going to miss out on.
Thank you. That concludes the official panel. We're going to play a fun game, and then I will let you guys go back to being great people in this world. So, if you're familiar with TikTok, this is a game that has been circulating TikTok and Twitter.
It's involved dancing.
It is called, no dancing.
Okay, God, okay.
It is involved he, but, and how it works is, someone is a perfect person, but they don't do X, Y, Z. So it lowers their rating. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rate Me or BMS. That's something they used to have in middle school. So an example is, they're a 10, but they don't early vote. So they're a 6.5.
Oh, I got one. They're a 10, but they don't vote all the way down the ballot. So they're a 2.
Ooh.
I'm a city council candidate, okay?
Don't be a 2.
It's a make or break for me.
They're a 10, but they didn't participate in the census.
Ooh. Okay. They're a 10, but they think signs are votes.
Ooh, I like that one. Taylor, what you got?
Oh gosh, guys, I'm not good on the spot.
We bought you time.
I know it's so I missed it blanked out at the first, but it's they're a 10 game is what I'm getting the gist of. Okay. They're a 10, but they don't bring a person with them to go vote.
Ooh, I like
That's
that one.
registered to vote.
Mr. Lazarus. I think everyone should get in on
Oh, okay. They're a 10, but they think that there's a thing in the world that has nothing to do with politics.
There too.
You have anything?
They're a 10, but don't take the time to listen to their peers and their viewpoints.
Oh.
It sounded like a 0. If you guys want to play one more game, very, very short game, we can. It's knocking on 6, it's up to you guys. Sure? Okay, this is a game from Mr. Lazarus. So, it is where we take something very random in the world and connect it back to politics. Anyone who wants to answer can answer in their own way.
So this is a game that I play with my students where I call it Stump the Professor, and I tell them to name something and I explain how it's connected to politics. So they'll name like the most random thing that they think they can stump me with, and I'm like, no, that's political too. And
Well, so now you can turn the tables in. So the professor stumps us.
Oh.
So you.
except I already know everything's connected to politics. Okay. Okay. Time.
Ooh. The local legislatures to control whether or not we use daylight savings.
Wow.
I like it. You were quick.
Wow.
What else?
Okay. Onion. An onion.
Ag policy.
Huh?
Onion?
She said ag policy.
Yeah, ag
Agricultural
policy and like subsidies for farmers.
They're good.
Oh, I can take that even a different level. So not even just subsidies for farmers, but when you lower the amount of immigration that's able to come into this country, and we tend to have immigrant labor as our most common way of getting them, you're going to have less onions on your shelves, or they're going to be more expensive because you have fewer folks out there who are picking onions in this country. Or if you're not going to increase the labor or the price that they make. It's also economics.
Okay, one more.
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning?
Yeah.
I got that one. So that's also city planning. People who typically live in politically disenfranchised areas are more likely than not to live in a heat island because it is less trees and overdeveloped in those areas. They run their air conditioning more, and therefore their air conditioning costs more money.
Ms. Taylor?
Give Taylor something random.
Yeah, do I have another?
Oh gosh.
Microphones.
Ooh.
Microphones. Well, microphones, I go to the entertainment industry. So thinking about our taxes and our economic policy and how the entertainment industry benefits and plays into those policies.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for whoever is watching in the future. Get involved. Have fun.
Thanks for our moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Lazarus.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job.
Thanks.
Thank you for making it a great panel.
Will we be able to all take a photo?
I've taken a few